Protests continue this week in Iran as tens of thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Tehran and other cities across the country in the largest outpouring of government opposition since the 2009 presidential elections there. President Trump tweeting his support for the protesters on Tuesday, saying, quote, "The people of Iran are finally acting against the brutal and corrupt Iranian regime. All of the money that President Obama so foolishly gave them went into terrorism and into their pockets. The people have little food, big inflation, and no human rights. The U.S. is watching." Amri Sarin is the managing director at the Israel Project and a noted Iran watcher. So welcome.
Thank you.
So how much of a threat to the rulers in Iran are these protests, or are they likely to fizzle out?
You know, the protesters face overwhelming odds. The consensus is probably that this round will not be the round that brings down the regime. But what's happening right now is you're seeing economic complaints and economic inequality, disparities and so on, people not having food, like the president said, being channeled into political complaints and political requests and political grievances.
So this is different than 2009, which was mainly political.
Yeah, it started off different. Listen, economic dissatisfaction underlies all protests, right? It's necessary but not sufficient. These protests began in different places by different people than before. It is people who are hungry and unemployed marching in the streets, and the regime made a mistake. The regime immediately treated it as a political issue, not an economic issue, and we saw they came down on the protesters, and they made it a political issue, and now they face a problem, which is they can't solve the underlying economic disparities because the regime is corrupt and because it spends its money on terrorism, and that now is a political issue.
One of the things that you heard in all these demonstrations is complaints about foreign adventurism. Money to Syria, money to Hezbollah. We were supposed to get money from the nuclear deal to help Iran, and instead it's going for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's a pretty potent theme.
It's an incredibly potent theme, and it shouldn't have happened. You know, Paul, when the nuclear deal was sold in 2015, the Obama administration told us that the regime would spend its money on guns, on butter and roads, not on guns.
That was explicit. The administration said that many times.
In as many words. In fact, they sent people out to say it. That was never going to be true. And now the Obama guys are saying, well, you see, we unmasked the regime. But that's not exactly what happened. What happened is it's the latest excuse, it's the latest rallying point, not excuse, it's the latest rallying point for Iranians to say, listen, we're not seeing a penny of anything, and these cycles are likely to continue spiraling downward.
So when you say cycles spiraling downward, you think maybe this round will fizzle out?
Yeah.
But then you'll find it erupting, you think, in the future for some other flashpoint?
I think that as long as the regime is unable to take care of its dispossessed, as long as the regime is unable to get food on people's tables, you will see cycles of dissatisfaction because the economic issues have now become political. And the regime will be unable to do it because this is a regime that's committed to exporting the revolution at all costs. It's committed to military adventurism at all costs. There is no, it is what they want to spend money on. And so, yeah, I think you're going to continue getting a lot of unrest.
Well, look, just step back for a second. If you were the regime and you saw that you were in trouble like this, okay, and you said, you know, we need domestically to do something about this, could they possibly pull back from Syria? Could they pull back from Yemen? Could they stop funding Shiite militias in Iraq, for example? Would that be possible politically and have them survive?
It's an interesting question. Politically, yeah, they could probably do it politically. The problem is ideologically they probably couldn't do it. But it's an interesting point that you're making.
When you say ideologically, why not?
Because this is a regime that's committed to expansion. This is a revolutionary regime. You know, we don't see many like these.
Shiite millennialism, basically, and expansionism.
Not just Shiite millennialism, but also old school expansionism. This is a regime that is committed to exporting the Islamic Revolution. The people who run it are committed, and the IRGC is especially committed.
And yet, Roil and other people who watch things inside Iran say that the public itself is becoming increasingly secular. It doesn't share many of the mosques aren't filled.
That's right.
I mean, and the mosques, in fact, are a lot like European churches. Nobody goes into them anymore.
That's right. That's right.
So if that's the case, then you don't have that ideological fervor, that revolutionary fervor with the public.
But you do with the people who are running it, which gets to exactly what you were saying. The idea that this is not a regime that is ideologically capable of realigning itself with its population. But you know, you make an interesting point. We may think that, we may assess that this regime cannot pull back from Iraq, cannot pull back from Yemen, but if you're Iraqis, if you're the Houthis, if you're Hezbollah, you got to be worried that they will. You got to be worried that they turn inward, and it's an opportunity for the United States to begin looking at this situation and going to some folks who are on the bubble in the Middle East and saying, like, listen, this regime is going to have to pull back if it's going to survive. How sure are you that they're not going to pull back?
And making them pay a higher cost for their adventurism.
That's right.
By further greater resistance, arming some of the opponents, for example, in Syria. Can we also do something, we don't have a lot of time, but can we also do something to help communications inside Iran? The opposition, they shut down the internet, the government did, or Telegram, this internet popular service. Can we help them get around that firewall?
We have the tech. I mean, we have plans on the shelf ostensibly to help them, but it's the right way of beginning to ask this question. What can the administration do to help protesters? And they're looking at a range of things. Administration officials are talking to journalists and are briefing people about everything from their efforts to increase communications technology to upping their game on digital diplomacy to trying to make sure that information gets there, is created, and gets through there, in addition to more punitive measures that they're going to start investigating.
All right, Amri Sarin, thank you for being here.
Thank you.